My mom flew me home for the holidays and told me to babysit while she went on vacations with her boyfriend. She called me late at night, not angry, not dramatic, just crying. The kind of crying where someone is trying to be quiet, but you can hear it anyway. She said she missed me, said the house felt empty without me, said the kids were growing so fast and she felt like she was losing everything at once. She told me she needed me home, not wanted, needed, and the word stuck in my chest like a hook. I hadn't been home in a while, work had been heavy, life had been moving fast, but hearing her like that made everything else feel small. I booked time off the next morning. I didn't even think it through. I told my manager I needed a week. I packed a bag that night. I kept telling myself this trip would fix something, that it would bring us closer. That maybe if I showed up, really showed up, the guilt I carried would finally quiet down. I imagined family dinners, late night talks with my mom, watching movies with my siblings on the couch like we used to. I thought this was me choosing family over everything else, just for once. The flight felt long, even though I barely slept. I kept replaying her voice in my head, the sadness in it, the way she said she felt alone. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself this was what a good daughter does. When the plane landed, I felt nervous but hopeful, like I was stepping back into something familiar. Like maybe this trip would finally heal the distance between us. She hugged me tight when I walked through the door. Too tight, like she was afraid I'd disappear again if she let go. The house smelled like my favorite food. She had cooked everything I loved. She kept smiling, touching my arm, asking me if I was tired, if I was hungry, if I was happy to be home. I thought, this is it. This is what she meant. This is why she needed me here. But standing there with my bag still in my hand, I didn't know something important yet. I didn't know that this wasn't a visit. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't about missing me at all. I didn't know that I wasn't flying home as her daughter. I was flying home as her solution, as her backup plan, as the person who would step in so she could finally step out. And I wouldn't understand that until it was already too late. I'm 26 now. I live in California, far from the house I grew up in. I work at a real estate firm as a strategist. It's a job I fought for. I started working when I was 16, right around the time my life split in half. I didn't grow up with the luxury of drifting. I learned early that stability doesn't appear on its own. You build it, brick by brick, while everyone else is still figuring out who they are. I paid my own way through school. I worked weekends, nights, summers. I learned how to survive before I learned how to rest. My parents divorced when I was 16. It wasn't loud at first. No screaming matches or slammed doors, just silence. Long, heavy silence that filled the house like fog. Conversations stopped halfway through. Eye contact disappeared. Then one day my dad packed his things and left. No big speech. No explanation that made sense. He was just gone. And when he left, the house didn't feel broken right away. It felt hollow. I had a younger brother who was 12 years younger than me, a sister 13 years younger. They were still kids. They didn't understand what was happening. They just knew things were different. I wasn't really a kid anymore, but I wasn't an adult either. Somehow, without anyone saying it out loud, I became something else. The person who filled gaps, the person who noticed things, the person who stayed steady when everything else felt unstable. I chose my mom when they separated. I stayed with her. My dad didn't forgive me for that. He stopped visiting, stopped calling. He said I picked a side, and maybe I did. But at the time, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like gravity. Someone had to stay, someone had to help, and that someone became me. I didn't announce it. I didn't plan it. It just happened, one small responsibility at a time. My mom leaned on me more than she probably realized. I helped with the kids, with rides, with meals, with decisions that felt too big for my age. I helped with money when I could, even when I barely had enough for myself. She worked hard, I never doubted that. She did everything she could for us. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being just her daughter. I became her support system, her safety net, her proof that she wasn't completely alone in all of this. When I moved to California for work, that weight didn't disappear. It just followed me. Even from thousands of miles away, I checked in constantly. I sent money home. I worried about my siblings like they were partly mine. Every success I had felt slightly undeserved, like I had taken something that didn't fully belong to me. Like I had escaped while my mom stayed behind, stuck in the same routine, the same house, the same exhaustion. She would tell me she had no life outside the kids, no friends, no time for herself. Her days were work, chores, responsibilities, repeat. And every time she said it, I felt something tighten inside me. Like I was somehow responsible for filling that emptiness. Like my leaving had created it. I never said that out loud, but I carried it quietly. So when she called me crying, saying she felt alone, it hit the exact place I'd been protecting for years. That phone call didn't stop with tears. After the crying came the words, the heavy ones. She told me I left her alone with everything. That while I was building a life in California, she was stuck raising kids with no help. She said she didn't recognize herself anymore. She said her entire life was about taking care of everyone else, and no one ever took care of her. She didn't yell. That somehow made it worse. Her voice was tired, flattened by years of holding things together. She asked me when I stopped needing her, when I stopped coming home. She asked if I even remembered what it felt like to be part of this family. Each question landed slowly, like she was placing them carefully where they would hurt the most. I tried to explain. I talked about work, about pressure, about how hard it was to take time off. I reminded her that I helped when I could, that I sent money, that I called. She didn't argue with me, she just dismissed it. Said phone calls don't fill an empty house, said money doesn't replace a daughter. That's when the guilt fully settled in, heavy and familiar. Like an old voice I'd learned not to question. I could hear my siblings in the background of the call. I imagined them growing up without me around. I imagined my mom sitting at the kitchen table late at night, alone. And I broke. Not loudly, quietly, in the way that looks like agreement. I told my manager I needed a week. I didn't ask, I said I needed it. Work wasn't happy. Projects were piling up. Deadlines were tight. But I told myself family comes first. I told myself jobs can be replaced, but family can't. I booked the flight before I could change my mind. I told my mom I was coming, and the relief in her voice was instant. She thanked me again and again, said this meant everything to her, said she just wanted us together again, even if it was only for a little while. As I packed my bag, there was a small voice in the back of my mind that felt uneasy. It asked why this felt less like an invitation and more like a responsibility. I ignored it. Because ignoring it was easier than admitting something about the way love had always worked in my family. The first few days after I arrived, I felt calm in a way that almost made me suspicious. My mom cooked every meal like it was a celebration. Breakfasts were slow, dinners lasted longer than usual. She made dishes I hadn't eaten in years, things I used to request as a kid, things she hadn't had time to make once life got heavier. She watched me eat like it mattered. Like she was studying my face, checking for signs that I was still here. My siblings barely left my side. They asked endless questions about California, about my apartment, about my job. They wanted to know what my days looked like, what my weekends felt like, what it was like to live somewhere new. They wanted details, not because they cared about the place, but because they cared about me. We stayed up late watching movies, whispering jokes so we wouldn't wake mom. We argued over snacks. We laughed about stupid things. For a moment, it felt like the years in between hadn't happened. I told myself this was proof I did the right thing, that coming home mattered, that whatever pressure I felt at work would be worth it. I let myself believe this was a reset, that my mom just needed time with me, that she wanted to feel like a family again before the holidays passed. I didn't question how carefully everything was arranged. I didn't ask why she seemed lighter than usual. I didn't notice how she checked the time more often than before. One afternoon, my siblings asked if we could go out, just us, no parents. They wanted ice cream. They wanted to walk around town. They wanted to do the things we used to do before schedules and stress took over. My mom smiled and told us to go. She said she was tired and needed rest. She waved us off like it was nothing. We stayed out longer than planned. We talked about school, friends, things they were worried about, things they didn't say around mom because they didn't want to add to her stress. I listened more than I talked. I felt needed in a way that felt natural, not forced. On the walk back, I felt proud of myself, proud for showing up, proud for being present. When we opened the front door, the house felt wrong. Not quiet, different. My eyes went straight to the hallway. 2 suitcases stood there, packed. Standing upright, clean, organized, not rushed, ready. My siblings stopped behind me. They asked whose bags those were. I didn't answer because my chest had already tightened. My mom and her boyfriend were in the living room, dressed, shoes on, calm, waiting, smiling. Like they had been expecting us back at a specific time. Like this was all part of the plan. My mom stood up and said it casually, the way someone does when they're announcing something minor. She said she was going away for a few days. Just a break. She said she deserved it, that she needed time for herself. Then she looked at me and said, "You'll watch the kids, right?" It wasn't a question. There was no pause for discussion, no room to respond. It was stated like a fact that had already been agreed on. I stared at her, waiting for a smile that would tell me this was a joke. It never came. Her boyfriend reached for the suitcases. I asked what she meant. She said after all these years, I could do this for her, that I was here anyway, that everything was already set. She said she'd be back in 2 or 3 days. No big deal. She spoke like she was asking me to water plants. I told her I had to go back to work. I reminded her I had taken time off for this visit, that my job wasn't flexible. She brushed it aside, said I'd figure it out, said family comes first. She hugged my siblings quickly, kissed their heads, then hugged me last. She whispered thank you like she was being helped, not like she was leaving. Then she walked out the door. The house felt hollow the moment it closed behind her. My siblings stood there, confused, asking questions all at once. When was mom coming back? Where was she going? Why didn't she take them? I told them it was just for a couple of days. I told them everything was fine. I said it confidently, even though my stomach was twisting. That night I didn't sleep. I called her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. The next day passed slowly. I tried to keep things normal. Breakfast, schoolwork, smiles. I told myself she'd come back soon, that this wasn't what it felt like. By the third day, work started calling. At first it was polite, just checking in, then it wasn't. Deadlines didn't pause, projects didn't care where I was. I called my mom again. Voicemail, again, voicemail, days blurred together. I cooked, I cleaned, I helped with homework. I reassured my siblings every night. I counted the days she was gone. 2 days became 3, 3 became 4. She didn't call, she didn't check in. It was like she had stepped out of her life and decided not to look back yet. That's when it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding. That's when I understood this trip was never about missing me. She didn't fly me home to spend time together. She flew me home so she could leave. So she could walk away without worrying about what she left behind. So she could finally choose herself and not have to answer for it. And I was the reason she could do it. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. I woke up early for school routines. I spent my days juggling calls from work, trying to sound professional while hiding the chaos around me. I stayed up late making sure my siblings felt safe, but nothing felt stable. And my mom was still gone. My job needed me back, not eventually. Now, I could feel years of work slipping away. Everything I had built felt fragile all of a sudden. One night, after my siblings went to bed, I sat alone on the couch and cried quietly. Not because I was tired, because I felt trapped. No one was coming to fix this. There was no adult stepping in, no backup plan, just me. That's when I made the decision. I couldn't stay, and I couldn't leave my siblings behind without knowing when my mom would return. So I packed bags again, not just mine, theirs too. I told them we were going on a trip. I kept my voice calm. I didn't make it sound permanent. The flight back to California felt heavier than the first. I watched my siblings sleep and promised myself I wouldn't let them feel abandoned. When we reached my apartment, it was small, but it was safe. We figured things out slowly. Schools, schedules, groceries. I adjusted my life around them without knowing how long it would last. 2 weeks passed before my mom finally called. 2 weeks after we settled into my apartment, my phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. I knew it was her before I checked the screen. My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened, my hands felt cold. I had imagined this moment so many times that it felt unreal when it finally happened. I answered, already tired. She asked where we were, not urgently, not with panic. Just a simple question, like she expected the answer to be obvious. I told her we were in California. I told her the kids were with me. There was a pause on the line, but it wasn't the pause I had prepared for. No rush of apologies. No fear, no guilt spilling out, just silence. Then she exhaled and said something that knocked the air out of me. She said those days had been the best days of her life. She said she hadn't felt that light in years. She said she laughed without forcing it, that she slept through the night. That for the first time in a long time, she didn't wake up already tired. She talked about waking up without a schedule, without noise, without responsibility pulling at her from every direction. She said she finally remembered what it felt like to just exist as herself. I stood there holding the phone, my mouth dry. I had spent weeks holding everything together, juggling work, school, routines, fear. And she was telling me how free she felt. I wanted to interrupt her. I wanted to remind her of what she left behind, of the kids who asked for her every night, of the job I almost lost, of the plans she made without telling me. But I didn't. I listened, not because it didn't hurt, but because I realized something in that moment. She wasn't calling to check on us. She wasn't calling to fix anything. She was calling to talk about herself, to say out loud what she had been holding in for years. And for the first time, I heard her not as my mom, but as someone who had been living on empty for a very long time. When she finally stopped talking, I told her the kids were safe. I told her they were doing okay. I didn't give details. I didn't reassure her beyond that. I didn't offer to bring them back immediately. I didn't ask when she was coming home. I didn't ask where she was. I simply told her we had things under control. She didn't argue. She didn't demand anything. Maybe she sensed the shift. Maybe she knew she had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We ended the call quietly. After that, I sat alone for a long time. I didn't feel angry the way I expected to. I felt clear. Clear in a way I hadn't felt before. I thought about who my mom was before everything revolved around survival. Before marriage. Before kids. Before responsibility became her entire identity. I imagined her young, full of plans that never got space to grow. That understanding didn't erase what happened. It didn't soften the impact, but it gave me context. And context matters. It keeps bitterness from taking over. It keeps you from turning pain into punishment. I called her back a few days later. I told her the kids would stay with me during the week, that I would bring them back on weekends, that we would make a schedule, something predictable, something that didn't involve surprises or last-minute disappearances. I didn't ask for permission. I stated it calmly. She agreed without pushing back. That's when I knew things had changed. I didn't stop loving my mom, but I stopped rearranging my life around her needs without question. I stopped equating love with sacrifice. I learned that helping someone doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. That showing up doesn't mean giving up everything you worked for. My siblings adjusted slowly. They missed her. They always will. But they also found stability, routines, school, a sense of safety that didn't depend on someone suddenly leaving. My apartment became loud and crowded and imperfect, but it was steady, and steady mattered. My mom got something she had been craving for years: space, freedom, a chance to remember who she was outside of responsibility. I got something too: clarity, the kind that only comes when you stop filling gaps that were never meant to be yours alone. Family is complicated. Love doesn't come with clear instructions. Sometimes the people who raised us don't know how to ask for help without hurting us. Sometimes they don't even realize what they're taking. And sometimes, choosing yourself feels selfish until you realize it's the only way to keep showing up without breaking. If you've ever felt like love came with an assignment, if you've ever been expected to carry weight you didn't choose, if you've ever been made responsible for someone else's freedom, you're not alone. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop disappearing. And sometimes, that's the most loving thing you can do. If you enjoyed this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this and subscribe to the channel.